Finding out the truth about my wife. We spent 2 years together in college and got married the fall after we graduated. Spent 2 years exploring our relationship and finally got settled down and was ready to raise a family. She got off birth control and her libido took off, but it took 3 years for us to get pregnant. But we got a beautiful girl finally. After a couple of months, my wife got back on birth control and had a hard time with it. Her doctor switched her meds several times, but she had bad side effects with each one. We talked about it and were unsure if we wanted another child. And since it was easier for me to get a vasectomy reversed later, if we decided to have more children, I had the operation. That was 3 years ago. And after coming off birth control, my wife has felt better. And sex has been worry-free since we can no longer get pregnant. We actually have sex more now than when we were in college. Then 3 weeks ago, my wife was late for her period, which isn't that unusual for her. Then I noticed her breasts were a little tender, and she started what seemed like signs of morning sickness. Now I know there have been cases of nature reversing vasectomies, so I went to the doctor and had my sperm count checked, and the verdict was, I'm still sterile, but I didn't tell my wife. My wife finally went to her doctor and confirmed she was pregnant, and so she had me go to my doctor to get tested. I didn't go right away because I was literally sick from the stress of the situation. I had all sorts of sick scenarios going through my head. In the end, I got retested, and I took my daughter in and had a DNA test done. I got both test results back today and got violently ill after reading them. Yes, I am sterile. And no, my daughter isn't mine. When my wife got home, I showed her my test, and she denied any wrongdoing and saying that there was a problem with the test. And I showed her the test from last week, and she broke down crying. I finally got it out of her who she had slept with, and that it only happened once and the condom must have failed. I made her tell me the story 3 times, and each time I asked her if that was the whole truth and if there was anything else that she needed to tell me, because another lie would mean we were through. She said that was the only time, and she had never done anything like that before. I told her how much this hurt me and asked her how she could do this to our family and if it was worth it. I asked her if she wanted a divorce, and she pleaded with me to forgive her and put this behind us. I said I couldn't raise someone else's child and asked her if she would be willing to terminate the pregnancy in order to stay together. She cried the rest of the night, but when we went to bed, she said she would do whatever it took to save our marriage. I never brought up the DNA test. I will contact a lawyer next week to see what my options are about. If I have to pay child support on our first child. If she had come clean about the father of our first child, I could have swallowed my pride and tried to work to forgive her. But she thought she was in the clear and didn't need to confess to anything else. No telling what I'll never know. Lawyer update. My lawyer is awesome. She had me bring in a bunch of paperwork, bank statements, and my medical and DNA results and had me tell her my story. Her assistant sat in with us and took notes while my lawyer went through my documents. After I finished, she asked a few questions and spelled out my options. I live in an at-fault state, which is good and bad. Good as in, it gives us leverage. Bad as it takes longer and much more expensive. In the case of the first child, if my wife agrees to sign the papers, my liability for child support is an easy fix. If she doesn't agree, then a court-ordered DNA test and a judgment from the court can remove me without my wife's consent. Either way, I will most likely not have to pay child support. One way is just more expensive than the other. Since my wife has a good job and earns close to what I do, she didn't think the judge would award her any alimony. And all of that, plus dividing up property and other things, can be negotiated before a judge gets involved. The bad news was due to the holidays. They couldn't have the papers ready before Christmas, but definitely would before the end of the year. She advised me to say nothing until she got served. She gave me a list of things to do before and after Christmas before they served my wife. One thing they did point out was since we were actively trying to have a baby, there was a possibility that my wife didn't know that the child wasn't mine. My wife has an appointment with her OB tomorrow. Update, getting served. So I met my sister at my house, and we started moving my stuff to her house while the divorce goes through, or at least until my STBXW leaves and I get possession of the house. We took 4 carloads to her house and came back for the rest. My sister felt it important for her to be there for support and as a witness. I also moved the nanny cam into the living room so it could record everything in the cloud. At about 10:45 a.m., I got a text from the lawyer saying she had been served. I sent her an email saying that I am at the house when she is ready to talk. A couple of minutes later, I got a text from my wife saying, "Why, blah, blah, blah." So I resent the first text and waited for her to get home. She sent several texts and voicemails. They don't mention anything about cheating, just how she thought we were working this out, and she thought we would sit down and have a conversation before proceeding with a divorce. Playing the family card and how this will devastate the child and our families. How she feels betrayed, that was a good one. She was still sharing her location, and it took her 20 minutes before she left work. She then stopped at a nearby Walgreens for a few minutes. The purpose of the stop at Walgreens became clear as a police car pulled in behind her in the driveway. According to the officers, she got the police there because she said she was afraid and that we had guns in the house. I showed the officers my empty gun safe and said that I had removed them to another secure location. We went back to the living room and I showed my wife the paternity test that I had done that showed her daughter was not mine. Her response was denial and disbelief, which appeared genuine. She broke down and cried for about 10 minutes. I told her this was the final straw and why I wanted the divorce. At about that time, the police officers reminded me to keep it civil and made their exit after I told them I was leaving soon to stay at my sister's house. When I asked who the child's father was, she claimed she didn't know. I asked if there were that many guys she was sleeping with, or did she just not know his name? I asked how many times had she cheated on me between pregnancies, to which she said it was just the 2 of them. I told her that I had said earlier if she didn't tell the whole truth that I was done. I reminded her I also told her that I wouldn't raise someone else's child, and that she had better figure out who the real father was because I wasn't paying child support for someone else's baby. She wanted to know what we were going to tell our daughter, and I said that was up to her because this was her mess and I wasn't taking the blame or cleaning it up for her. I drafted a couple of emails last week, one for our friends and family, with copies of all the test results and reasons why I was asking for a divorce. The other for my wife, with copies of the same tests along with what I knew, and things that I had told her previously. I had to run it through my lawyer and make a couple of edits before she signed off on it. I sent copies to all our friends and relatives when she pulled into the driveway this afternoon. Most of the feedback has been one-sided and very colorful. In the end, I told her if she had been truthful, we might have been able to work things out, but I couldn't trust a lying serial cheater, and I told her if she had gotten her tubes tied, instead of me getting a vasectomy, she might have got away with it. I told her she needed to get a lawyer so we could move forward and start to heal. Update. We had our second meeting with the lawyers today, and we signed off on almost everything except the house, still waiting for an appraisal to come back and figure out the split. Motions got filed today, and a court-ordered paternity test was scheduled for all 3 of us. Since STBXW didn't fight me on everything, we filed a no-fault divorce petition. If everything goes right, I get the house back on February 15th, and the divorce will be final on April 5th. The lawyers did a better job keeping us separated and the conversation between the 2 of us to a minimum. I was a little worried when she came in, pale and with no energy to speak of. I couldn't tell if it was lack of sleep or maybe over-medicated. She just stared out the windows as the lawyers read everything to us before we signed some of the papers. Walking out felt like I had shed a giant weight from around my neck. HR got me signed up for therapy tomorrow. My boss had put a bottle of champagne on my desk, offered me some time off if I needed it, but I told him I was excited to get back to work, tormenting my ex-wife's AP. So throughout and after my divorce, I have kept in contact with Sharon, OBS, as we had shared details about our ex's affair, and both of us were interested in the consequences our spouses ended up suffering, and we provided each other moral support. We talk on the phone and usually have dinner once or twice a month to catch up. Last month, Sharon said that one of her friends was getting married and had invited her to the wedding. Her ex, Stan, was also invited as he was a friend of the groom. Her invitation had a +1, and she pitched the idea of me going with her, both as moral support and as a dig at her ex, Stan. It was a weekend event and we would share a room with double beds, strictly platonic. The idea amused me, so I agreed. We flew in the day before the wedding and had dinner with several of Sharon's friends. I was introduced as her friend, no mention of our history and the divorce. We didn't run into Stan until right before the ceremony, as they escorted us to the bride's side, while Stan was seated on the groom's side. Needless to say, he was less than pleased and kept looking over at us, something Sharon was well aware of. At the reception, we were seated with some of Sharon's friends from the night before, and we picked up where we left off, and everyone was quite engaged. Stan was seated at a table across the room from us, but in clear view. We danced quite a bit together, and probably drank more than we should. There was a brief confrontation with Stan and Sharon, but her friends diffused it quickly and spirited Sharon away. At the hotel after the reception, we had drinks with 2 other couples, several comments about Stan shooting daggers at us all night, and a few about how cute a couple we made, and questions about if we were serious or not. We laughed it off and said we were just friends. I had to support Sharon on the way to the room and had my arm around her. On the cramped elevator ride, we were standing quite close. When we got to the room, there was a tense moment and we kissed. Good judgment lost out to the alcohol, and we ended up sleeping together. Next morning, we never spoke much about the elephant in the room as we rushed to catch our flight home. We did run into Stan as we were checking out, and he made a snide remark and walked off. Once we were on the plane, we talked about what happened, that neither of us were sorry, but questioned the wisdom of the timing. We both agreed we each needed some time to process what happened, and agreed to have dinner next week and talk about it then. I know neither of us has tried to date since our divorce. I haven't been in the right headspace to even flirt, much less date. I have a session already scheduled with my therapist where I will bring this up, but we did have a great weekend at the wedding. Thank you very much for listening or watching. It helps to support this channel either way. We greatly appreciate it. Please like and subscribe to further support and not miss another story. Until next time, have a great rest of your day or good night.